Alright guys, I'm here back with a new video, and in this video I'm back talking about Power Rangers once again, where when I did my season ranking, I did say that a video I did want to do at some point down the road would be a ranking of every Red Ranger, and here we are. I'll be ranking every main Red Ranger in the Power Ranger series. Now, to qualify who I am ranking here, this will be the Red Rangers from solely the television product first, so again, no comic or movie Red Rangers. Also, these have to be the main Red Rangers for each of these series. I will not be including, again, evil Red Rangers that show up at points, one-off Red Rangers, Rangers that only hold the title for a few episodes, even specific other Rangers that other people would include as a Red Ranger, like the likes of Eric from Time Force. While he might be a Red Ranger, I qualify him as a 6th Ranger, to where, again, if I ever get around doing a 6th Ranger ranking, he'll be on that list instead. Also, another weird circumstance is someone like Hunter from Ninja Storm, who I did debate with that one quite a bit, to be honest. I decided to just leave him off for the sake of simplicity, in the fact that, again, we already have a Red Ranger from Ninja Storm, and while he's technically the Red Ranger of the Thunder Rangers, it feels a bit strange to have him on the list, and to be fair, even if he was, he would be pretty low on it, so I decided to leave him off. But with that, we do have 24 Red Rangers to be ranking here. Let's start off at number 24. The worst Red Ranger in the series for me is Troy from Power Rangers Megaforce. And Troy is just a weird character in the fact that he's not really a character, where again the big issues of Megaforce just his lack of characterization for a lot of its cast, and Troy really suffers from that, where he's simply just this do-good that really has no real character traits to him outside the fact that he never gives up, and he's also just a straight up boring character too. He has no personality. There's no time given to give him a personality, and while there are other characters that are also pretty boring that are higher on the list, I feel like my issue with Troy in particular is that he takes up a good chunk of screen time. It kind of just drags the season down even further due to the fact that he is so focused on in the season, even though he has like really nothing going for him. So again, he's just such a boring character to me, where he's at the bottom here at 24. Now at 23, the person who I thought would be at the bottom, character I've always hated since I was a kid, and that person is Nick from Power Rangers Mystic Force. And again, Nick just sucks. I mean, Nick is a character that just kind of comes off as a dick for a lot of his run. I mean, while there are moments of him being a decent Red Ranger, particularly in Dark Wish Part 3, where that's why I got points thinking about giving up. They don't give up, perseveres to return the world to normal. Outside moments like that, he's just kind of an unlikable character. I mean, the shame is that he's such a major character as well, where he is essentially the main focus of Mystic Force, which, I mean, to be fair, with most Red Rangers, that is the case. I mean, that is why we're ranking them here, is because usually a lot of these characters are the main characters for their specific seasons. However, Nick is just so focused on through his season, it's just unlikable the entire time. I mean, he comes off as very selfish. He comes off as very cocky at points. And there are moments where he wants to give up. Again, none of these are likable traits. And I love how, like, literally in the finale, after he's supposedly gone through his character development, he still has this moment where Madison asks him if he's coming back. He literally says, only if there's a reason to come back for, very much implying it would be for a relationship with her, when it kind of like negates all of his friendships he made along the way, making it seem like he doesn't care about literally anything else outside of the chance of hooking up with Madison. And I personally never liked Nick. I do feel like the amount of focus he gets on Mystic Force really just drags it down for me, because he is, again, the main character of the season. And, like, to be told, I mean, his backstory isn't the worst in the world, but I just really dislike his character, so that's why he's here at 23. On 22, we're moving on to more boring protagonists, outside of actively bad ones like Nick. And here we do have Aurico from Mighty Morphin Alien Rangers. And straight up, Aurico was a debate for me on do I include him, because in a way, I can kind of see him being looked at similarly to Hunter when debating if he should be on the list or not, though I decided to put him on mainly because he is the sole Red Ranger of his team. And I mean, there's not really much to say. I mean, none of the Alien Rangers really get much time to develop. I mean, they're obviously not even on a full season of the show, which is also, again, like a thing that I debated on if that was enough to put him even on the list. I decided to, because again, he was technically in the entire series of Alien Rangers. But again, just mostly a bland character, didn't really get much to do. He's not even the leader of his team. He's second command. He's pretty much just a forgettable character. And one that, again, I don't have really anything positive to say about him, but nothing truly negative outside of the fact that he's just kind of boring. So because of that, for me, he's here at 22. Number 21, moving on to another pretty boring Red Ranger, and that is Brody from Ninja Steel. And Brody to me is just like a slightly better version than Troy. I feel like he at least has a little bit more character to him. But I'll say that again, he is pretty boring. I mean, he doesn't really get that much to do, especially after finding his family. And while his backstory is actually a pretty strong one, again, one that's kind of interesting. Again, he was kidnapped as a child and forced to work as a slave for aliens. Yet despite that, we get no real depth to his character. We don't really get to explore any of the trauma that he faces through that. And outside of his search for his family, we really never get to see much of his backstory. And really, I feel like Brody is a character of a lot of wasted potential. With his character as is on screen, he's kind of just a boring presence, where, again, Ninja Steel is certainly not the most riveting season of the show, but I think I probably like all 4 of the other core Rangers more than I like him. Where again, to me, he just comes off as largely boring and doesn't get that much development either. So again, I just don't feel like there's that much to truly prop him up for, and that's why he's here at 21. Now number 20, and now we're getting to characters that at least get development. I still don't necessarily like these characters, but at least there's something there. And at 20, we have Jaden Shiba from Samurai. And I mean, again, at least he has character development. I mean, he starts off standoffish and wanting to do everything on his own. He learns through the course of the season to work with others and allow his teammates to help him out. And again, there's development there, at least. Now, outside that, I mean, he's a pretty bland character. I mean, he is essentially just a one-for-one ripoff of his Sentai counterpart. And it does kind of bother me how much the other characters on the show kind of worship him. And when we see him like leave after Lauren comes back, which again, in itself is really stupid. Yeah, a lot of moping around about how Jaden's gone, which is like doing the complete opposite of what he was trying to do. And I feel like that entire arc was a very strange one for Jaden. But again, I just feel like he's another character that is kind of bland. He at least has character development, so at least there's that. But really outside that, I don't really have much to truly praise him on. But there's not as many demerits as for the people we've talked about so far. So because he's here at 20. Now number 19, we're moving on to a character that I think has probably lower lows than Jaden, though probably has higher highs, and that character is Mac Hartfield from Operation Overdrive. And again, Mac for the most part is also pretty bad here. I do think Mac is just kind of whiny for a lot of the season. A lot of it being him complaining over why his dad won't let him do things, and we even have him quitting in Once a Ranger, and all that's really bad. However, I think the positive for him is that I do think he has an interesting arc on the season. Now, while it is told in a pretty heavy-handed way, I do like the reveal that he was an android and seeing him having to come to terms with that. And yeah, I think that's an interesting storyline for Power Rangers to attempt here. To me, a more interesting storyline than that of Jaden, where really I feel like they're pretty similar. And I do feel like Max quitting during Once a Ranger is probably a worse moment than anything Jaden has, though I think his overall arc is a little bit more interesting. So again, I think it's pretty close between the two, but for the sake of this video, I went with Mac here above him at 19. Now, number 18, moving on to a character that is just fine, which, I mean, to be fair, is kind of where we're at the list. I feel like the ones we talked about so far are all the bad Red Rangers. I feel like now we're getting into the okay ones. Now, 18, we do have Rocky from Mighty Morphin, and Rocky's a character that I just kind of feel bad for, in the sense that he's obviously a Red Ranger, though obviously he's always relegated to second command due to Tommy obviously taking the forefront, and obviously he later gets demoted from Red Ranger by the time we get to Zeo. But really his stint as a Red Ranger is largely unnotable, mainly because, like, again, he doesn't even fulfill the role that a typical Red Ranger would. Typically the Red Ranger would be the leader of their team, or at least be a major focus in the show, and he's really neither of those. He's simply just kind of there, while Tommy, who is the White Ranger, ends up taking the lead instead. And yeah, because of that, I don't feel like Rocky gets that much development. And to be fair, I mean, that's a lot of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, but Rocky just mostly comes off as a kind of shallow character, especially throughout the course of Mighty Morphin, where I don't feel like there's much to put him too high, though again, I didn't find him unlikable at any point. I feel like he's a purely affable character, but just one that, again, there's not these major high points to really assess him amongst the better characters we're about to be talking about. So because of that, for me, he's here at 18. Now, number 17, we're moving on to a character that I've always been conflicted with. I'm sure people are going to be upset that this character is so low, considering the popularity of the series he comes from. However, at number 17, I do have Connor from Dino Thunder. And Connor's a character that I never never liked when I was a kid. Like I mentioned this in my season ranking, that Dawn of Thunder is a season that I didn't really connect with as a kid. And I do feel like Connor was kind of an aspect of that. I didn't particularly like Connor at the time. He just kind of comes off as a dick early on. But to be fair, I mean, again, that's part of his arc. He does have this character development through his series where he does become a better person by the end of the season. But again, at the very beginning, again, he's a dick. He's openly sexist. He just does not come off well. He just comes off as this typical high school jock with not much depth to him. And to be fair, I don't know how much depth there really is to him by the end of the series, but at least he does change, so at least there's that. But at the end of the day, I still never found Connor to be super likable. I think when we're looking at the characters we're going to be talking about later on, I either think those characters are more affable than Connor, or are characters that, again, I have more of a personal connection to. And while, like, again, nowadays, I don't think Connor's a bad character by any means. I just feel like the other characters stand out a bit more for me, and because that Connor is left behind here at 17. Now, number 16, we're moving on to a series of more recent Red Rangers, a lot of them being extremely affable characters, ones that have glimpses of development, though aren't really the most complex characters in the grand scheme of things. But at 16, we're starting it off with Devon from Beast Morphers. And really, again, from 16 on, these are all characters I really like. I like Devon. I like the Beast Morphers cast as a whole. I like Devon's arc of him trying to gain the respect of his father. The problem is that that's kind of resolved halfway through the series, where, again, by the end of season 1, arc's pretty much done, where he doesn't really get much to do in the second half of the season. Now, again, he is a likable presence, and that's something that's definitely helping him on this list. Again, I just feel like in comparison to a lot of the characters we're going to be talking about later, they just do more than Devon does, where it doesn't feel like he gets as much of a focus as many of the other characters we're going to be talking about down the road. So again, I like Devon, but I just feel like in comparison to the other Red Rangers, I'm going to leave him behind here at 16. Now, number 15, keeping with more recent Red Rangers, and here we're going to another one that might be controversial. I don't know. I'm going to go Zato from Dino Fury. And Zato's fine. I mean, Zato very much reminds me of certain other characters we're going to be talking about a little bit down the road, of this kind of fish out of water character that is obviously very different than the rest of his team, and his team tries to teach him the realities of how to live in this world, where, again, we got a lot of content of him learning about modern society, and we obviously get the awkward moments like Coolio and stuff like that. Again, like, that is essentially Zato's character outside of these very plot-centric moments, where, again, like, Zato's obviously a character that is very integral to the plot of the series. Like, he is a major focus in the series, in his search for Rafconia and finding out what happened there. The problem for me is that, again, I don't feel like he develops that much through that. It just feels like it's things kind of happening to Zato and not really doing much to truly enhance his character. So again, I come out of the series thinking, okay, he's a likable presence, but not really one that truly elevates beyond that. I feel like he has some notable comedic moments, and he does have some notable moments after his reign as a Red Ranger, but again, solely basing this on his role as a Red Ranger, I do feel like he's, again, good, but simply not in line at the top tier Red Rangers for me, and that's why he's here at 15. Now 14, moving on to a Red Ranger that I really want to place higher. However, I just feel like considering her very short stints, I can't, and that is Amelia from Cosmic Fury. And again, this is a ranking based on their role as a Red Ranger, what they do as a Red Ranger. And again, I think if we're taking her arc from Dino Fury, I think through that I would have an excuse to put her much higher on the list, probably bordering on the top 10. However, I think without that, she's simply just okay. Again, in Cosmic Fury, there's not that much time for her to really do much. Now, again, she's still a likable presence there. She does find her place as the leader of the team, and obviously is the first female Red Ranger in a main series, which is, again, really cool stuff there. But I wish she was given a bit more time to breathe, a bit more time to actually lead outside of fight sequences. And again, she certainly has her moments here and there, but I just don't feel like she really gets to do that much as a Red Ranger, especially in comparison to most other Red Rangers. And that's, again, simply due to the limited time, which I do think is a shame. But I do think as a whole, again, I like her character. It's still, like, not one of the greatest of all time to me, but certainly one that I did want to put higher. But considering her short role, I couldn't really justify it, so she's here at 14. Now, number 13, and here we essentially have the top modern Red Ranger as the top one since the Neo Saban era, which is kind of surprising, really. And at 13, that person is Tyler from Dino Charge. And Tyler from Dino Charge is another, like, largely affable character. I feel like he's another one that, again, like, feels like they don't go far enough with his character. Again, it feels very much in line with someone like a Devon, as this person who, again, has this arc arc of trying to find his father and eventually does so. And then after that, he doesn't really get that much more to do on the show, but again, is a likable presence. I like Tyler's personality. I do like his character. I just wish he was, again, given a bit more to do on the actual show. Now, in many ways, I think you could argue that he should be around where Devon is, which is, again, below Amelia and Zato. However, the reason I do have him above is because I feel like his personality does come off the most notable to me of the bunch, and I do feel like his presence felt the most commanding of the bunch. I feel like Tyler's presence on the season is one that's pretty integral to kind of just the overall vibe of the season. I think it is pretty close between really all four of these more recent Red Rangers that were in this tier, though Tyler's the one that came off the most notable to me, and that's why he's here at 13. Now, number 12, and here back to back, we're going with two really legendary Red Rangers, but Red Rangers that I just think when you look at them objectively and what they do on the seasons, they simply just don't have as much development as a lot of the other Red Rangers we're going to be talking about afterwards. So at number 12, I do have Jason Lee Scott from Mighty Morphin, obviously the original Red Ranger. And yeah, again, the issue with Jason is the fact that he's not that complex of a character. He's this generic do-good that doesn't really get much character development while he's there. Now, I will say, again, he is a likable presence, and he is one that does fulfill the role of leader pretty well. Again, there are moments where the others doubt their abilities, and Jason's the one to convince them to persevere. And beyond that, again, there is the one moment, I feel like, of pretty good character development for him, and him feeling guilt over Tommy having lost his powers, and him struggling to overcome that. And again, that's solid content for sure. However, at the end of the day, again, I do feel like most of his character is just this generic do-good, but he's obviously an iconic character. I mean, Jason's obviously one of the most integral characters to Power Rangers history. And again, I couldn't justify putting him much lower on this list. I do feel like just his importance alone and how notable of a character he is enough to put him above any of these newer characters I don't have as much attachment to. So yeah, I felt like it was justified to put Jason this high. But considering his character doesn't have as much depth as many of the ones we're about to be talking about, I did leave him here at 12. Now, number 11. Same thing. Another iconic character. We do have Tommy Oliver from Zeo and Turbo, I guess. I'm sure most of this assessment will be based on his role in Zeo, considering I don't feel like he really got much to do in Turbo at all. But this is another instance where obviously Tommy's a very important character to Power Rangers history. He's obviously the longest lasting Ranger in Power Rangers history, though he's also a character that never really had the most depth to him. He's, again, just another pretty affable person, kind of the generic do-good, one that obviously has a slightly better background than Jason. The fact that he obviously has his background as the evil Green Ranger, but really I feel like a lot of his characters comes down to how much of a badass he is. And to be fair, in Zeo, I do feel like they try to give him a bit more depth. I mean, they do talk about his heritage, and we have his brother being brought in. We build on his relationship with Kat, and it feels like they're definitely attempting to do stuff with him there. But I just feel like it never really leads to much. He doesn't really change his character at all, and he really has a mostly flat character arc. And to be fair, I mean, like, he doesn't need to change. I mean, he obviously is already this very notable Ranger, but I just feel like in terms of like his role as a Red Ranger, I feel like other Rangers just simply interest me more. I feel like they get more to do in terms of development or just outright feel a bit more unique than Tommy, who, again, we had already seen for seasons before this. His character doesn't really change over this season. And even despite that, again, he gets a major focus in this season to a point where I do think it takes away from the other Rangers, and it still doesn't really add too much to his role on the season. So I do think just as a whole, again, obviously Tommy's an iconic Ranger. If I were to do just a general ranking of the best Rangers of all time, I would assume he would be very high. But again, just solely ranking on the Red Rangers and what they did as Red Rangers, I am leaving Tommy out of the top 10 here at number 11. Now, number 10, we're moving on to a Ranger that I was a bit conflicted on what to do with this person, as I don't think this is the best written character in the world, and I think this is definitely a character that has its issues, but I personally just have a lot of nostalgia for watching this character, and that one is Cole from Wild Force. Now, is he really that different from the characters we've talked about earlier, from like a Zato, even like a Tyler, Devon? Like, not really. Again, like, he definitely probably should be in that tier. However, I did put him above him simply because, again, I have some nostalgia for Cole. I do also feel like his backstory is pretty strong, and the Master Org storyline is a really great one. I think there's something to say about his naivety, and in many ways it does remind me of a shonen character, which again, obviously I grew up on shonen, so that's something else that kind of makes his character feel a bit nostalgic to me. Now, again, it's weird looking at him from like the real world point of view when we look at like his actor, who obviously doesn't come off as the most likable presence in the world, but again, just purely from my experience watching him on the show, Cole is always a character I personally enjoyed, even though I never loved him as much as many of the other Red Rangers from these other seasons I have a lot of nostalgia for. But still, I felt like the nostalgia, plus his good backstory, plus his likeness to a shonen character, plus also the fact that he's involved in some of my favorite team-up episodes, and does have this like never give up attitude, is enough to really land him here at number 10. At number 9, we have a character that I really wish I could put higher, because I feel like this is probably one of the better written characters of the bunch, but this character is simply just not given that much to do, and that character is Scott from RPM. And again, Scott is a pretty strong character in my mind. Again, he has this great backstory of having this guilt over the death of his brother and trying to redeem himself to his father and earn his father's respect. And I really do like that aspect of his story. And even beyond that, again, most of his writing is pretty strong. I mean, RPM in general is a mostly well-written season, and through that it leads to him having some strong dialogue. He's pretty well portrayed by Eka Darville. He has all the makings of an all-time great Red Ranger. The issue is the fact that he's simply just not focused on the season. RPM is a season that's more so focused on Dylan, the Black Ranger, which again is an interesting quirk about the season, but it does kind of leave Scott behind, where while he is the leader of the team, he kind of comes off secondary to Dylan and his arc. Now again, I still like Scott as a character, and I still think he has some good moments with some decent development, but in comparison to the ones we're about to be talking about, every other one of these characters are essentially main characters of their series, while Scott is again more of a secondary character. So because that's again tough to really rationalize him being above all these other ones, so because of that, for me, he's here at number 9. Now, number 8, we're moving on to a character that, I mean, in many ways is another one of these that is like pretty in line with the Tylers, the Devons, the Coles of the world, though I think comes off the one that probably has a better overall arc than any of those characters, and that person is Casey from Jungle Fury, who again I think is in line with those other characters in terms of their affability. I think Casey's a likable character. I feel like there's never really a point where I don't like his character. I don't feel like he does anything necessarily wrong or has bad writing at points, maybe outside of the treatment of Fran, which can be a bit strange, but really outside that, again, I think Casey comes off as a mostly affable character, but also has a pretty decent arc. Again, I do like this aspect of him being this newcomer to the academy at the beginning of the premiere, and him being thrown into a situation where he has to become the leader of his team. And while it is kind of ridiculous, like, yeah, why is he the leader when he's the newcomer? I feel like his development over the course of the series, where he really ends up succeeding in that role, is again a nice arc to see, becoming a mentor by the end of the season. And again, like overall, I just think Casey is again another like mostly affable character, but does have a more well-rounded arc to him, while also being a major focus on the season, which is enough to land him here at number 8. Now, number 7, we're moving on to a character that I've always liked, and it is from a season that is one of my all-time favorites. However, something's always felt a little bit off for me in terms of placing this as one of my favorite Red Rangers, and that person is Andros. And again, I really like Andros. I again love In Space. Obviously, Andros is a major aspect of that, and he does have some great storylines, particularly his storyline with Corone and his storyline with Zane. He obviously has his romance with Ashley. He does have development over the course of the season as well that's very much reminiscent to that of like a Jaden, where he obviously learns to work with his team after being a loner at the very beginning. Again, that's good stuff. However, just something always has felt off for Andros to me. Maybe it's the fact that I've always was disappointed at the fact that a certain other character got demoted, a character that I personally like a bit more. Maybe it's the fact that a lot of my favorite Andros moments are ones that are from him in battle and not really from outside character moments. Like, I do actually struggle with like exactly why I don't feel like Andros is in the top tier, as I do think he has many of the makings for doing so. Again, he has this development over the course of the season. He is the strong leader for his team. He is a central figure of the season and is part of one of my all-time favorite seasons. Though, again, I just feel like I gel with a lot of the other top characters a bit more than Andros. So because of that, again, I am leaving him behind here, number 7. Now, number 6, we're moving on to a Red Ranger I do have a lot of nostalgia for. I mean, this is one that I always loved when I originally watched this season, though it is also one that it's a bit weird to look at nowadays, and that character is Shane from Ninja Storm. And obviously Shane is a weird character to think about nowadays, now knowing about his actor and what happened to him and the very questionable person that he was. But again, solely looking at Shane as a character, I personally did really like Shane at the time. I really like Shane's karma, the two-part where he gets his battleizer. I really like the episode Eye of the Storm, which is kind of a weird episode to think about now, as it very much paralleled his actor's real life, but it does have Shane being jealous of his brother's success and feeling like he's in his brother's shadow, which is kind of sad when you know what happened to Shane's actor. But again, those are individual episodes that I do really remember from Shane. And in general, I always liked Shane. I think he has a really fun personality. So where, well, I mean, there are definitely points where it feels a bit out of place. I again always found him to be a very likable Red Ranger, one that has a pretty nice arc on the season. Again, like literally his line of, we might not be Power Rangers anymore, but we still have powers. So while cheesy, is obviously still a very notable line to me, and this great moment of development for him, and obviously this great moment of him still fighting despite having lost his powers. And if we're solely looking at the character as it appeared on TV and how much I enjoyed it when watching it on TV, I do feel like Shane ends up landing here in number 6. Now number 5, now we're getting into my all-time favorite characters. A character that is a very flat character. This is another one, kind of back to the Tommy and the Jasons of the world, that doesn't really develop much, but it's just a badass on his season. And that character is Carter Grayson from Lightspeed Rescue. Now, I know you may be wondering, why is Carter so high here when you have the likes of Tommy and Jason, who are both pretty flat characters, and they're relatively low? And one, I mean, obviously I'm extremely biased against Carter, with Lightspeed Rescue being one of my favorite seasons, and one that I watched a lot as a kid. But beyond that, I do think there are some rationalizations here. I do think, for comparison to Jason, I do feel like Carter has a bit more depth to him. I mean, he does have the backstory of him being rescued by Captain Mitchell when he was younger, and that adding to his backstory. You also just have him being a bit more of a badass than Jason in my mind. Him literally trying to attack a grown monster on his own is pretty insane. And I think in comparison to Tommy, I do feel like, for me, I think it's also just kind of like the freshness of his character, where, like, again, with Tommy, again, this is an assessment of him by the time of Zeo, and I think by the time of Zeo, he just feels like more of the same. Well, Carter's obviously a very refreshing character, a very different Red Ranger for the time. And I think another thing that also makes me think of Carter a bit higher is maybe also the weakness of the rest of the Lightspeed Rescue cast, where, while none of them are particularly bad, I do feel like Carter definitely does feel like a standout out of the original group, at least, to where I feel like maybe that's an aspect of it as well. But I mean, truth be told, again, like, at the end of the day, the greatest factor of them all is purely my own bias. Again, I do just like Carter, and obviously I have a lot more nostalgia for Carter. Yeah, I just think Carter's a badass, and to be fair, a lot of it does come from Sentai footage, but it still does enhance his character, and with him having a decent backstory as well, I feel like it's enough to land Carter here at number 5. Now number 4, we're moving on to a character that also doesn't have that much development, but is also just a badass, and one that I personally really like. We do have TJ from Power Rangers Turbo. Now, again, this is a bit strange because obviously TJ was only a Red Ranger for like half a season, a little bit more than that, but I think he has a great run when he is the Red Ranger. Again, I've always really liked TJ. I feel like he's just kind of this natural leader. He stands up for what's right. He obviously felt very refreshing as a new Red Ranger after having taken over for Tommy. He obviously goes out of his way to save Tommy and convinces Cassie into doing so as well. He, at the end of Chase into Space, he obviously leads the Rangers through some pretty difficult battles and the destruction of their Megazords in Chase into Space, along with the destruction of the power chamber. He continues to persevere. Again, like, to me, I just feel like there's a lot to like there from TJ. Where, again, does he develop that much through his story? Not really. Again, he's kind of the same character from when he joins and from when he leaves, which, again, is very different from the top 10 list, who I think have pretty big character arcs. But again, I just feel like TJ's a very likable character, one that I really don't have any flaws with his character. The issues obviously stem from, again, obviously a lack of time as a Red Ranger, and obviously him not getting his development as the top 2. But again, still a Ranger that I personally always love, so he's here at number 4. Now number 3, and the top 3 here are 3 characters that I think go on massive character arcs throughout their seasons. 3 of my favorite character arcs from all of Power Rangers, which is the main reason why they're the top 3 Red Rangers here, all of which I do also have a level of nostalgia episode 4. At number 3 here, we're going to start off with one that I could definitely see a lot of argument for this being the best Red Ranger of all time. I do think this is a Ranger that has one of the most fulfilling story arcs, though I think there's a little nick against them, which makes them a tinge lower than the others, and that character is Jack from Power Rangers SPD. And again, I really like Jack. I mean, Jack is a character that really made me love SPD at the time, and really him and Sky, I think, are two of the best characters on that season. I think Jack's arc's a really interesting one in the fact that he is this strong leader. He is this good Red Ranger, mind you, one that's again a little bit strange they're making him the Red Ranger when he's a complete newbie, but is also one that gives up the Red Ranger role. I think it's this interesting choice from him in the finale of him to let go of being a ranger in order to run a homeless shelter instead. And again, that's something you don't really see in Power Rangers, which again is this interesting spot for his character to go. So again, I think he's another one that like has all the makings of an all-time great Ranger. I think for me, part of the reason why he's not higher on the list is kind of because I feel like he kind of shares the focus on this season with Sky, to where I feel like him and Sky both get pretty great amounts of development, and Sky probably has a better overall arc than Jack. Again, for me, it really is this fact that to me, he does very much compete on this season with Sky for how prevalent of a character he is across this season, to where I feel like the top two are by far the best character arcs on their season, to where because Jack doesn't take as much of a spotlight, and also to be fair, again, I don't have as much nostalgia for Jack as I do with the top two, it's enough to leave him here at number 3. Now number 2, and I mean, just like my season ranking, these are the Red Rangers for my top 2 seasons. However, just like my season ranking, at number 2, I'm going to go with Wes from Time Force. And I love Wes. I think Wes has a great arc, probably one of the best arcs in Power Rangers history. Him starting off as this rich, stuck-up kid, and obviously developing through the course of the series to climb out of his father's shadow and make a life for himself and defy a destiny that he was told about. He again goes from this kind of jerk that just wants to be the Red Ranger because it's fun into this person that almost sacrifices himself to stop this robot invasion. I think he has like the perfect mix of having this fun, charismatic personality, but also some depth to his character as well. These moments where he is fighting for what he believes is right, and he ends up being really central to the overall season's themes. Now, there's something to note in the fact that he obviously isn't the leader of his team, where that's Jen. I don't really feel like it takes away anything from Wes's character, especially considering how major a focus he is despite that. And really, I feel like his relationship with Jen is also really strong as well. I do really like how it slowly develops over the course of the season, and it still comes off to me as one of the more notable Power Ranger relationships in the show's history. Like really, I just feel like there's a lot to like from Wes here. For me, I don't feel like there's a major negative. The only reason he's not number 1 is, again, I have more connection to the number 1 pick. So as much as I do love Wes, I'm leaving him here at number 2. Now number 1, my number 1 Red Ranger in the show's history is, again, probably debatably my favorite character in all of Power Rangers, a character that I remember loving as a kid. I remember this probably being one of my favorite characters just in general as a kid, and that person is Leo from Power Rangers Lost Galaxy. And I already mentioned this before, Lost Galaxy is my favorite season. It's a season I loved as a kid. I still love it now, even though it has its holes. However, I do think Leo is a major bright spot of that season. I think Leo is just a really great Red Ranger. He's one that it does have a great arc on the season. Again, like Wes, he does start off as this kind of cocky kid, and one that wasn't even destined to be the Red Ranger, and only becomes the Red Ranger due to the fact that Mike ends up falling to his presumed death. And it leads this interesting dynamic with Leo of him being unsure if he's worthy of being the Red Ranger, and we get some great development for him in Destined for Greatness, one of my all-time favorite episodes of Leo coming to terms with his role as the Red Ranger, and where he learns that he is worthy of holding that role. And beyond that, we have his great rivalry with Turkina, and we obviously have the moment of him ripping off his shirt, which is kind of this notable moment there. But I just love everything with his character and Journey's End, where we have this great final moment of character development for him, and him being asked if he regrets being a stowaway, where he says he wouldn't miss it for the world. We have his final battle with Turkina, which is still an all-time great moment for me, of him being willing to sacrifice himself to blast her at close contact, and the shot of him surviving with a broken helmet and him putting his thumbs up is also another really notable moment for me. Again, like, just for me, again, this is a purely biased assessment here. I just love Leo. He's a character I adored as a kid. Well, I've never been one to really look at fictional characters as role models. I feel like if there was one that I did look at as one as a kid, it would have been Leo. Again, I really just adored his character from when I was younger, and I still really enjoy his character now. And to me, I feel like his character is very reminiscent of Wes. While I feel like Wes probably fulfills the themes of the overall season a bit better, I feel like Leo still has a pretty strong arc over the course of the season, and just obviously has a lot of nostalgia factor for me to where I did end up landing him at number 1 here. But there we go. I mean, that is my ranking of every Red Ranger in the show's history. Now again, how many more Power Ranger videos will I end up doing on this channel? Who knows? There's still things I would like to do. I've always wanted to rank the crossover episodes, even ranking the 6 Ranger debut episodes, ranking the 6 Rangers. Like, there's enough stuff that I would like to do at some point down the road to where maybe I'll do them, maybe I won't. Don't really know, but hopefully I can get around to them at some point. But outside of that, obviously just expect more of the reality TV content and other random stuff that I typically make on this channel. But for now, that is the video. Thank you for watching.